Welcome in to another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I am so glad you've decided to join us for this wonderful little half hour where we're going to talk all things motorsports. Because on today's show, we have a lot of races to recap and cover, a lot of news to recap and cover, as well as a lot of races coming up, not just this weekend, but also next weekend. Next weekend is going to be one packed weekend of racing, so we got to get you ready for it, but we also got to get you ready for this weekend's races. So, without further ado, please be sure, if you like this show, to follow me on social media. You can do that by looking up rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS 33. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. I'm even on Blue Sky, whatever you want to find. And then be sure as well to make sure you have the WTHR Plus app installed on your smart TV, and be sure to be subscribed to WTHR on YouTube so that you can get notified whenever a brand new episode of The Racing Report drops for your viewing pleasure. All right. Let's go ahead and get right on into the news today because we've got no time to waste. We've got a big packed show for you in store today, so we've got a lot to cover. So let's go ahead and jump right on into that Formula One news, because the biggest story that we talked about last week has now become official. It is that Red Bull has officially moved on from Liam Lawson and is replacing him with Yuki Tsunoda. Lawson has been demoted back down to the RB, or the Racing Bulls. And that is the change that is going to happen here as we go into the Japanese Grand Prix. So, very curious to see what's going to happen on that front. Stay tuned for later in the race, because when we preview the Formula One Japanese Grand Prix, we will talk about what might be happening with those Red Bull drivers and the RB, and how will that dynamic be between Isaac Hadjar and now his new teammate, Liam Lawson. All right. Second piece of Formula One news that we need to talk to before we get into anything else is that Aston Martin Lagonda, the holding company in charge of Aston Martin, is reportedly selling its stake in the Aston Martin Formula One team, but it will continue as the team's title sponsor. So no buyer has been identified yet, but it is believed that this move is being done essentially to give them a little bit more capital, almost $160 million worth of money that they can free up. And so that is what they have decided to do. But they will, again, this doesn't impact the sponsorship or the involvement with the Aston Martin F1 team. It's just simply them making a business decision, really, to help give them some more cash when they need it. So now let's talk about some more Formula One news on the Cadillac F1 front. Mario Andretti, who is on the board of directors of the Cadillac F1 team, has commented publicly and said that the team is apparently interested in hiring Sergio Perez as a driver for next season. But Perez, when asked about this, has apparently said that he will only return to Formula One if he's presented with a quote-unquote project that motivates him. So could Checo be in a Cadillac F1 car in the future? I don't know. We will have to see. Maybe this project does interest Checo a bit. You know, I would hope and think he might be able to bring some kind of sponsorship money to that team, which would likely be very helpful. But again, things can change, and we'll see. Again, they've named a decent amount of drivers as possibilities. Colton Herta, of course, is one, but it seems like Sergio Perez, that kind of rumor has been really gaining steam lately, so we'll have to keep tabs on that and see who Cadillac F1 does eventually name as their two drivers as we get closer and closer to the 2026 season. I know it's only April, so it's kind of crazy to be talking already about next year when we're not even 3 races in, really, 4 races into the Formula One season, but that is something that we'll have to keep looking at as the time moves on. All right, and then for the final piece of Formula One news, this is very interesting. So Toto Wolff has appeared to confirm that Mercedes is indeed looking to sign George Russell to a possible contract extension. Now, Russell's contract is up at the end of 2025. Could he potentially be looking to go elsewhere? Not if Toto Wolff has anything to say about it. And there were a lot of rumors, of course, that Max Verstappen's contract with Red Bull ends in 2028. Maybe Mercedes wants to have something on the on the table if Max Verstappen turns into be a free agent in the future. But again, that's That's far more in the future. That's 2028 we're talking about. This is 2025. We're only talking now about 2026. So anything can happen. But hey, the silly season dominoes always like to fall in Formula One when you least expect them. So we will just have to monitor that here on the Racing Report and see what comes of it. But for now, let's go ahead and transition into some IndyCar news, because there is a lot to get to here with this IndyCar news. Again, we are now in April, which means we are less than a month away from the month of May, and the Indianapolis 500, arguably, if not arguably, it is the biggest IndyCar race of the year. And we have some news that will likely be pretty interesting as we near that date. So first piece of news that we need to talk about here is that former IndyCar president Jay Frye has a new job. He has joined Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing as that team's new president. He will oversee the team's operation in both IndyCars and sports cars. Meanwhile, Steve Erickson, who has served as RLL's Chief Operating Officer, so COO, since about January of 2023, has reportedly parted ways with the team. So some new directions going. RLL, Rahal Letterman Lanigan, going in a little bit of a new direction. Graham Rahal says he's ready to hit the ground running with Jay Frye as the president. We've seen Jay Frye have success in NASCAR. We've seen him have success as IndyCar's president. At least I think so. He was doing a pretty good job. But now Doug Boles is in that role, and now Jay Frye moves back onto the team ownership role, which is the role that Doug Boles had before he got the IMS role. But funny how everything seems to work out. Now, let's talk about something really big in the world of IndyCar, because I am very, very curious to see what comes out of this and what ends up being true and what ends up being, unfortunately, another false promise from IndyCar management. So the first part here is Mark Miles discussed the 2026 schedule with Racer Magazine. You can go on racer.com right now. You can read this story, and I highly recommend taking a look at it, because it's got some interesting quotes from Mark Miles there that I think are really worth reading. But I'll kind of summarize what was going on here. So some of the key points include the series really kind of being unsure about Thermal's future. It was interesting to note in that interview that Mark Miles admitted that he was unhappy with how much of a dive the ratings took between St. Petersburg and Thermal. He was also apparently less than impressed with Fox's coverage cutting out for, about the 20 minutes that it did during that race. And so now it seems like the series is kind of evaluating what they want to do with Thermal in the future. And so if it's not a points race next year, which again, it would be very interesting to see, it would have to be probably in one of the early parts of the season when it's a little bit cooler down there in Southern California. Granted, it'll probably be 80 degrees anyway, but a little bit cooler than maybe it would be in, say, July or August, or maybe extending it into September, maybe that might be a little bit too hot too. But also apparently the series is saying, well, we're not going to leave it entirely. We could also look at it as just our permanent testing venue. We could just go back and make Thermal the permanent test venue, which I think would be great for everybody involved in terms of fans. But this administration in IndyCar seems to really like the Thermal Club, so we will see what happens there. But then the other interesting thing to note when we talk about building that schedule and what IndyCar has to do in order to build this schedule is 2026 will have to be, the series will have to work around Fox's coverage of the World Cup, which, remember, that starts in early June and goes through early July. So it's about a month long of just continuous coverage across Fox, FS1, FS2, all that stuff. And so it was basically, from what I understand, is it's going to be very similar to how NBC treats non-Olympics programming during the Olympics. So it's going to take kind of a back seat. So anything on a Fox Sports property that is happening in basically the month of June and early July is going to have to take a back seat to the World Cup coverage. That then throws into, well, what is IndyCar going to do? Because they need to maintain that kind of momentum coming out of the Indianapolis 500, which would be right around the time that the World Cup would start, which is early June. So now you have to ask yourself, well, what do? You have this whole month here, this maybe 4 or 5 week block where you may or may not get the most comprehensive coverage from your broadcast partner. Now, Mark Miles, however, did say that, he's pretty confident that all of the IndyCar races next year will again be on Big Fox on over-the-air TV. But again, a lot of that could change, and IndyCar could get bumped to FS1 if perhaps World Cup coverage comes before. If there's maybe a major World Cup match that needs that Fox spot more than maybe IndyCar. Maybe Fox is willing to give IndyCar. All of these things are going to have to be looked into, and all of these things IndyCar is going to have to work around when building next year's schedule. Now, the third part of this that's really interesting to discuss is that Mark Miles said he is unsure when, keyword when, the series will return to Denver. There's no if there. It seems very much, the way that wording was made, seems very much like the series is in talks to potentially revive a Denver street race. Where that would be, I don't know. Would it be around the Pepsi Arena? No, excuse me. What is that now? The Ball Arena or something? I don't know. Maybe it'd be kind of cool to see a revival of that old Denver Champ Car race that we saw between 2002 and 2006. I think Denver is a very important market for all racing series to get to, not just IndyCar, all racing series. I'm talking IMSA, I'm talking NASCAR, I'm talking literally, heck, Formula E, why not? All of these, that would be a great market there for some racing, and I think IndyCar has to take it. But here's what's interesting is Mark Miles says that could come in 2026, but it would also be no sooner than 2027. So, kind of some mixed signals there. One hand he's saying 2026 is a possibility, but it also might be no sooner than 2027. We'll have to see how much maybe some of those discussions go. If they go well, if they don't go so well, we'll have to find out. Hopefully the series does make a return to Denver. But again, this is the thing that's really important to keep in mind of. What have we talked about so far? The IndyCar series going primarily to road courses, to street courses. That has been the series' MO, as again, NASCAR appears to have a monopoly on most, if not all, of the ovals in North America, making it very hard for IndyCar to get to ovals without spending money. IndyCar has made it clear that they don't really want to spend money on going to a race unless if they have to promote it. They want somebody else to promote something like that, and they don't want to have to spend the money to do so. So this next piece is interesting. So Miles also believes that an IndyCar race at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City could come to fruition next year. And he says that if it does, it would likely be another race during that March to April timeframe. So here's what you're looking at is you're looking at a situation where you'll start the season in IndyCar. This is tentative. This is very tentative. This is based upon what they've been talking about. Okay. So we could obviously start the season in early March at St. Petersburg, and then we could maybe have a week off, if not just go straight into another week. Whether that would be Thermal Club or maybe even Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez is yet to be seen. But we would likely have both of those races, if they both happen, if say the series decides to go back to Thermal, it would likely slot around that time. So you could see the series go to St. Petersburg, Mexico City, and then Thermal Club before maybe going to Long Beach and Barber, depending on how that all works out. But notice, again, no ovals before the Indianapolis 500. Absolutely zero ovals before the biggest oval of the series. And I really think that is something that Roger Penske has been trying to prevent. Now, the last piece of news that I'm talking about here is when Mark Miles was discussing this, he said something about Fox's coverage helping them immensely. And I think that's interesting to note because he talked about how, they're getting people talking about, hey, here's an idea. Someone is calling IndyCar. He didn't say who, but someone is calling IndyCar to hopefully, possibly get a race going out east. Okay, what do you mean by out east? There are a couple of options. But what is the most feasible? You look at all those East Coast tracks, and it's a market that IndyCar does not have any races in at the moment. Would the series go to Watkins Glen? Unlikely. Would the series go to Richmond? Not unless NASCAR said they could. Would the series go to Pocono? Likely not that early. So, again, that kind of takes all of the possibilities for an oval race before the Indy 500 next year off the table right now, unless something crazy gets changed or a race gets moved, up in the schedule. Again, that all is unlikely at this point since IndyCar seems to be more interested in getting road and street courses on the schedule than really going after and keeping the current ovals that it has. My opinion on that is very strong, and if you want to follow me and listen to my podcast, you can hear more about that. But before you go ahead and do that, I'm going to say we're going to take a break. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Supercars news that's coming up, that's big to talk about, and we're also going to talk about the NASCAR news coming up from this past week, because there's a lot of it to talk about, and yes, there is another lawsuit that we need to discuss. So don't go anywhere. You are watching the Racing Report. Welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and now we are going to continue our news segment today talking about the world of supercars, and this is kind of interesting. So Supercars, in a couple of weeks, they're going to go to Taupo in New Zealand, the second time that that series has raced there. Remember, they used to race at Pukekohe Park until that is no longer hosting major races. Sad, rest in peace. But a second Supercars race reportedly could take place in New Zealand as early as next year. Now, it was originally assumed that it was rumored, I should say, that Highlands Motorsport Park could take that slot. But now, apparently, the series is reportedly in talks with Ruapuna Motorsport Park in Christchurch. And apparently the Christchurch government is willing to give a little bit more money to tourism to maybe make this happen. So we'll have to see if maybe the Supercars series is going to go to New Zealand twice next year instead of just once, as it has been doing for the past couple of years. So interesting Supercars news to discuss there. Now let's move on to the NASCAR news, because we've got a lot of it to cover in a very, very short time to get to it. Legacy Motor Club is suing Ware Racing. This was the lawsuit I alluded to before we took our break. So LMC has sued Ware Racing, alleging that the two teams agreed to a charter sale effective at the start of the 2026 season. But Legacy Motor Club now alleges that Ware Racing has quote-unquote cold feet about the entire transaction. But Ware Racing later responded, saying that their side of the story was that the two sides had agreed on the charter sale, but it was for the 2027 season. And now Legacy is alleging that, Ware Racing is now alleging that Legacy Motor Club moved that date from 2027 to 2026 without proper communication. So that is really the gist of this new lawsuit that we have in the world of NASCAR, as if it wasn't two teams suing the sporting body itself. Now we have two teams going after each other. When will NASCAR news not involve a court of law? I wonder. We could probably make Law and Order NASCAR edition if we really wanted to at this point. All right. Next piece of NASCAR news we need to get to is that Steve Phelps has been named NASCAR's 6th commissioner. Now, he is the first person to serve in such a role since Charles Strang did from 1998 to 2008. But what's important to keep in mind is that the previous 5 commissioners that NASCAR had, those were all kind of honorary roles, ceremonial roles. They didn't really have any real influence on how the sport was going to govern itself. But now it's interesting to see Steve Phelps has been named this NASCAR commissioner. We really don't have a firm idea of what his job responsibilities and duties are going to be. But we do know that Steve O'Donnell has been promoted to now being NASCAR's president. So we have a new NASCAR president and we have a new NASCAR commissioner, again, for the first time since 2008, and this will be the first time that the commissioner role in NASCAR will actually really even mean anything when it comes to the day-to-day decisions being made by the sport. What's also interesting to note is that it seems as though this move was kind of just made to make them, again, more akin to stick and ball sports. And my co-host on my podcast, Josh Roller, he has kind of alluded to maybe this could have been done to help their case in that ongoing lawsuit that we've been talking about, where 2311 and Front Row Motorsports are suing NASCAR. I don't know. Again, it doesn't seem like that right now on the surface. You got to take that with a grain of salt, but it will be interesting to see how that case evolves, and then how Steve Phelps' role evolves as NASCAR commissioner. Now into some NASCAR driver news, some good news for Connor Zilisch fans. Connor Zilisch will get another try at the NASCAR Cup Series, this time in May at the Coca-Cola 600. He will drive the number 87 Red Bull Chevrolet for Trackhouse Racing once again. Now, what's interesting there, too, is that we could have people actually fail to make the show at Charlotte. And we have not had that outside of Daytona in quite some time, where drivers fail to qualify. So we could have about 41 cars showing up to Charlotte if everything goes well. And I'm kind of excited to see what that's going to be like. We'll definitely make the knockout qualifying that NASCAR has now, the one-shot qualifying, very, very interesting and very important to watch. It'll be definitely a show you won't probably want to miss. Now, some more driver news. Jesse Love is going to make his NASCAR Cup Series debut next weekend at Bristol, driving the number 33 C4 Energy Drink Chevrolet for Richard Childress Racing. And also at that race, Josh Bilicki is going to race the number 66 Ford for Garage 66 in the NASCAR Cup Series. So good to see Garage 66 again, making more and more of these attempts at races and getting more and more drivers. Like I said, they had Casey Mears last weekend at Martinsville. So some pretty good drivers being hired there for Garage 66. And then finally, this is some interesting sponsorship news. 2311 Racing has announced that Robinhood is a new sponsor that's joining the team. They will join the team as a sponsor of Bubba Wallace and Corey Heim in the Cup Series. Now, it's not been announced yet what races Robinhood will sponsor those cars, or what capacity, whether it will be a primary sponsorship, whether it will be an associate sponsorship, but we do know that at some point Robinhood logos will be appearing on 2311 cars, especially Bubba Wallace and then later of Corey Heim. So that is it for the NASCAR news this week, but stay tuned, because when we come back from break, we're going to just take a look at the Japanese Grand Prix, the NASCAR Throwback weekend in Darlington, and also preview all those races we talked about at the top of the show that are coming up next week. So don't go anywhere. You are watching The Racing Report. And welcome back to The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Let's get you ready and set up for this weekend's races, because we've got the Japanese Grand Prix coming up here in Formula One. It will be the start of a 3-race triple header going across parts of Asia and the Middle East. And honestly, this is going to be interesting. It will be so interesting. I am so curious to see how Yuki Tsunoda will do as teammate to Max Verstappen. I'm also curious to see, maybe will Liam Lawson have a little bit of a performance increase going over to the RB, which appears to be just slightly easier to drive than the Mother Red Bull. And then, of course, you have to ask yourself the question, too, how's McLaren going to do? Is McLaren going to keep up this streak of just winning races and dominating races? Or maybe is Ferrari or Mercedes, maybe even Red Bull, of course, with Verstappen, able to really give them a run for their money? Can we get a driver on the top step of the podium this weekend that's not a McLaren driver? I'm curious to see if that's possible. And the reason why is because, according to the weather forecast, there is a 50% chance of rain this Sunday at the Suzuka circuit. A rain race at Suzuka always throws a wrench into it, and I will be very, very interested to see how some of these drivers really handle that. And especially, think about some of these new drivers and new teams. How are they going to handle this wet race? And maybe how is Lewis Hamilton going to handle Ferrari's strategies, which sometimes can be very hit or miss? Because it definitely seems like Hamilton has found a lot of pace in the Ferrari. I know it's only been 2 races, but it looks like he's got a decent amount of pace. I'm curious to see if he's able to capitalize on that in this race, and maybe even in the next 2 races as well in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. I think that he could possibly get it done, but who knows? It's Ferrari. Ferrari is not the Ferrari of 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I should say, 2004. That team was unstoppable. But I'm really curious to see really how much of a factor this rain is going to be, and if it rains at all. Because if it does, I think it could throw in some very interesting pit strategy if it rains either at the beginning of the race or at the end of the race or in the middle of the race. Who knows? And again, it is Suzuka. Anything can happen. A lot of things. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to pass, but also a lot of times you see a lot of drivers kind of trying to very different things because track position is so key at a track like Suzuka. So we will see what happens there. The Japanese Grand Prix is set for Sunday morning at about 1 a.m. Eastern. So if you're watching this on Sunday when we air it on WTHR Plus, you've probably already seen it. But let's get you ready for the NASCAR race if you are watching it then, because the NASCAR race is coming. We got the Throwback weekend in Darlington, one of the most popular weekends of the year. We've got tons of beautiful looking throwback race cars over the course of the weekend. We've got a ton of really good looking ones in the Xfinity Series. Some of those Xfinity Series cars are chef's kiss right now. If you haven't checked them out yet, go to jski.com right now, click on the paint schemes, and check them out, because I promise you will not regret that decision. There's some really good ones, and you're going to want to be able to see them, really appreciate them before they go zooming by your TV screen. So Darlington. What do we got about Darlington? Well, it's a lady in black, and I think it's produced some of the best NASCAR races of the last several years, and I really think that the same thing could happen again this weekend. We've got a lot of things going on with a lot of different drivers. It's going to be a bit of a challenge. We've been going to, some different tracks. We haven't really gone to a track like Darlington, of course. We've been to Homestead, which is an oval track, but Darlington's more of an egg shape, if you know that. So, and also it produces a lot of unknowns. How's the tire wear going to be? What's the weather going to be like? Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be slick? Or is it going to be cool? Is there going to be a lot of grip? You got to look at all of those things. And then the other thing is, who can top Hendrick and Gibbs, which seem like the two best teams out there right now? I mean, they have all but one win, Josh Berry being the lone non-Hendrick or Gibbs winner to start the season so far with his win at Las Vegas. Can anybody get in there and knock those guys down? I am very curious to see if it can be done, but I think it can be. We saw last year with Brad Keselowski winning for RFK Racing, breaking that long winless streak. Maybe you could see a story like that come back into form later on this weekend. So curious to see about that. But really what we're going to look at is the Xfinity Series, because if you watch the Xfinity Series race at Martinsville, it was a complete disaster of epic proportions. Good gracious, it was a mess. Drivers were driving all over each other, showing no respect. You had a bunch of confrontations post-race, and of course, who could forget the last lap of Sammy Smith just sending it in there, shipping Taylor Gray into turn 3, then getting wrecked himself. Austin Hill, Sheldon Creed get by. Hill wins the race. Creed finishes second. Again, Brandon Jones has a great run come to an end. And then, of course, NASCAR has fined Sammy Smith. They fined him about $50,000 and docked him about 50 points for the race. So it's almost as if he didn't even race on Saturday at all. Is this going to change anything? Is it going to change anything with these Xfinity drivers? Are we going to see a cleaner race at Darlington? You would think, because Darlington is a speedway and not a short track like Martinsville. But still, you have Bristol next week as well. What's Bristol going to be like? I think that's going to be a real big test to see if anything that NASCAR said to these Xfinity drivers is actually sinking in, and if really Sammy Smith understands why he did wrong what he did wrong. We'll have to find out. But looking forward to that. NASCAR Cup and Xfinity Series are both in action this weekend at Darlington. Truck has taken another week off before they come back at Bristol. And speaking of next week, let's look ahead to the races that are happening next week, because again, so many of them. IndyCar, Long Beach Grand Prix. IMSA is also going to be there. We'll have IndyCar and IMSA. No Indy next. Indy next race is not until Barber. So they're not going to be at Long Beach this next weekend. You're going to have to wait till Barber for the next Indy Lights race. And then Supercars next weekend is also going to be in action. They're going to be in New Zealand at Taupo. Big race there. That's going to be a fun one to watch for sure. Going to see, who is, are we going to see more of the domination from the Red Bull Team Australia guys? I think possibly, but also don't count out Brody Kostecki and that Dick Johnson racing car, because they're going to have a little bit of a different look at when they roll into Taupo. But I think that maybe they'll have a little bit of luck on their side as well. Also, here's something you're going to want to mark your calendars for. Get your DVR set, because next week, Formula E is going to Homestead Miami Speedway. Now, if you've watched Formula E on an actual circuit and not on a street race, it's a lot different. There's a lot more room for these cars to move. Sometimes they'll go 3 to 4 wide. They'll race in real big packs. Lots of different strategy going on, especially with the attack mode and everything. I'm really excited to see this series go to Homestead Miami. Also because I think Homestead Miami's road course is very underrated. I really like it a lot, and I'm excited to see it used again for professional motorsports that's actually broadcast on TV. Like, this is a world championship that we're talking about here. So Formula E coming to Homestead Miami Speedway. If you're down there, I highly recommend maybe making your way down there into the Homestead region in Florida and checking that race out. Then, of course, like we already talked about, Formula One's going to go to Bahrain next week, and then NASCAR is going to have all 3 of its series in Bristol. It's Bristol, baby. It's Bristol. We're going to go from Darlington to Bristol. I'm hoping for some really, really fun weekends. But that is it for this week's episode of The Racing Report. I really appreciate all of you tuning in this week. And remember, if you like this show, please be sure to follow me on social media. That's RPEETERS33. Be sure to subscribe to WTHR on YouTube so you get every single new episode whenever it drops. And also, just make sure to have WTHR Plus on your smart TV, because you never know when this show might be coming across. Also, be sure we're on Tubi too. We're on a fast TV network, so you can also get us there. We're also available on Amazon Live channels. Check us out there if you got a Fire TV. Lots of different ways to watch the Racing Report, and we really appreciate all of you who tune in. So, for myself and WTHR, be sure to keep watching WTHR Plus, and we will see you again next week for another episode of The Racing Report.